Top 5 Most Ruthless Kings of England. King John, 1166 to 1216. Often labeled as the worst king in English history, treacherous, greedy, and oppressive in taxation, his misrule led directly to the creation of the Magna Carta. Henry VIII, 1491-1547. Famous for having 6 wives, 2 of whom he had executed, he broke away from the Catholic Church and ordered the death of anyone who opposed him. Richard III, 1452-1485. Suspected of murdering his 2 nephews, the princes in the Tower, to usurp the throne. He led harsh crackdowns against dissenters. William, the Conqueror, 1028-1087, ruled with an iron fist after invading England. Ordered the harrying of the North, a scorched earth campaign that destroyed entire regions and killed thousands. Edward I, 1239-1307, known as the Hammer of the Scots for his brutal campaigns in Scotland and Wales. In 1290, he expelled all Jews from England. Fan 1, King John of England, 1166-1216. A Ruthless Reign. Chapter 1. Origins and Early Life. John was born on December 24, 1166, at Beaumont Palace in Oxford, the youngest of 5 sons born to King Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Being the youngest son, he was never expected to inherit the throne. His nickname, John Lackland, was given to him by his father due to the fact that, as the last-born son, he was not originally granted any significant land or titles. Despite his initial lack of status, John received a good education for the time, learning Latin, law, and statecraft. His childhood was marked by the ongoing tensions between his father and older brothers, especially Richard and Henry the young king. These early family rivalries shaped his political instincts, emphasizing manipulation, alliance shifting, and ruthless ambition. Chapter 2. Rise to Power. After the deaths of his elder brothers and the ascension of Richard I the Lionheart to the throne in 1189, John began plotting to gain more influence. During Richard's absence on the Third Crusade, John attempted to seize the crown, aligning himself with disaffected nobles and even negotiating with the French king, Philip II. His attempt failed when Richard returned and forgave him, but the seeds of distrust were sown. Richard's death in 1199 left John the clear heir, and he ascended the throne that same year. His coronation marked the beginning of one of the most controversial and criticized reigns in English history. Chapter 3. The Tyrant Ascends. John's rule was immediately marked by conflict. His claim to the throne was contested by his nephew Arthur of Brittany, whom many saw as the rightful heir. In a brutal campaign, John captured Arthur and imprisoned him in Rouen. The boy disappeared soon after, with most historians believing John murdered him. This act shocked the nobility of both England and Normandy, setting the tone for his reign. John's governance style was autocratic and often vindictive. He imposed heavy taxes to fund his wars in France, and his constant demands for scutage, a tax paid instead of military service, angered the barons. He sold official positions and justice to the highest bidder, undermining the integrity of royal institutions. Chapter 4. The war with France. John's military campaigns were disastrous. In Navidad 1204, he lost the Duchy of Normandy to Philip II of France, a massive territorial and political blow. Over the following years, he attempted to reclaim these lands, spending enormous sums and taxing his subjects heavily. His defeat at the Battle of Bouvines in 1214 was a turning point. It marked the collapse of his continental ambitions and left him politically weakened at home. The barons, already discontented with his rule, began to organize resistance. Chapter 5. The Church Conflict. John also clashed with the Church. In 1205, he refused to accept Pope Innocent III's nominee for Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton. In response, the Pope placed England under an interdict in 1208, effectively shutting down church services. In 1209, John was excommunicated. He responded by seizing church lands and increasing his persecution of clerics. It wasn't until 1213 that he reconciled with the Pope, offering England as a papal fief in exchange for lifting the excommunication. This act, seen as a humiliating surrender of English sovereignty, further damaged his reputation. Chapter 6. The road to Magna Carta. By the 1215, widespread rebellion had erupted. The barons, furious at John's abuses and military failures, captured London and forced John to negotiate. The result was the Magna Carta, signed at Runnymede in June 1215. The Magna Carta sought to limit royal power and establish certain legal protections for the nobility and, indirectly, the common people. While John agreed under duress, he had no intention of honoring the charter. He sought annulment from the Pope, who declared it invalid. Chapter 7. Civil War and decline. John's rejection of Magna Carta led to the First Barons' War. Rebel nobles invited Prince Louis of France to take the English throne. John responded with a vicious military campaign, laying waste to rebel lands and punishing opponents with brutal efficiency. His army, however, was poorly supplied and overextended. During the campaign in 1216, John famously lost his baggage train, including the crown jewels, in the marshes of the Wash. Chapter 8. Death and Legacy. John died of dysentery on October 19, 1216, at Newark Castle. His 9-year-old son, Henry III, succeeded him under the regency of William Marshal. King John's reign left a legacy of chaos, rebellion, and reform. Though widely reviled by contemporaries and historians alike, his tyranny inadvertently led to one of the foundational moments in constitutional history, the Magna Carta. Chapter 9. Reputation. Through the ages. Throughout history, John has been portrayed as the archetypal bad king. Chroniclers described him as cruel, lascivious, and untrustworthy. He became the villain in the Robin Hood legends and was even damned in Dante's Inferno. Modern historians recognize his administrative abilities and his impact on the development of English governance. However, the ruthlessness of his rule, marked by betrayal, greed, and cruelty, defines his legacy. Chapter 10. The lost lands and betrayed nobles. One of the central themes of John's reign was his failure to retain and defend the Angevin Empire. His military ineptitude and diplomatic missteps not only resulted in the loss of Normandy, Anjou, and other French territories, but also alienated many nobles who held lands in both England and France. These barons found themselves caught between loyalties, and John's heavy-handed governance offered them no incentives to remain loyal. John's arbitrary confiscation of lands and hostages, his abuse of feudal rights, and his reliance on mercenary forces further deepened distrust. He showed little concern for building lasting alliances with his nobility. Instead, he relied on fear, intimidation, and financial extortion. In doing so, he weakened the feudal bond that had once held the realm together under his father and brother. Chapter 11. Economic Policies and Taxation. To fund his wars and increasingly expensive administration, John instituted one of the most oppressive taxation regimes of the medieval period. He levied scutage more frequently and at higher rates than his predecessors. He also imposed arbitrary fines and demanded huge relief payments from nobles when they inherited estates. His treatment of wealthy Jewish communities as sources of quick revenue became notorious. John imprisoned Jews and seized their assets, exploiting anti-Semitic sentiments to justify what was essentially state-sponsored theft. Such measures helped fill his coffers temporarily, but eroded social cohesion and justice. John's obsession with income also led to the systematic sale of justice. The royal court became a marketplace where verdicts were influenced more by payment than by principle. This corruption further inflamed the barons and commoners alike, reinforcing the need for reform that culminated in Magna Carta. Chapter 12. Diplomacy and the foreign crown. John's handling of foreign diplomacy was marked by paranoia, betrayal, and short-term thinking. His marriage alliances were often politically clumsy. Most infamously, His decision to marry Isabella of Angoulême, who was already betrothed to a nobleman aligned with King Philip II, sparked a rebellion in Aquitaine that directly contributed to the loss of Poitou and Anjou. Perhaps even more damaging was John's betrayal of his continental allies. He frequently promised aid to counts and dukes opposed to the French crown, only to abandon them when convenient. This shattered English influence on the continent and made John a deeply distrusted figure in international politics. His surrender of England to the Pope in 1213, in exchange for protection against French invasion, was interpreted at home as both cowardly and humiliating. Though it forestalled immediate disaster, it was another blow to John's already fragile prestige. Chapter 13. Governance and royal household. John's court was a reflection of his character, highly centralized, heavily influenced by money, and rife with fear and suspicion. Unlike his father, who had relied on a more collegiate form of government involving his barons, John excluded the nobility from decision-making. He preferred the advice of a small inner circle of favorites and administrators, many of whom were seen as self-serving opportunists. Royal officials under John were given sweeping powers to collect taxes and enforce laws, often leading to abuses. Castles were fortified not as symbols of national defense but as instruments of royal control and intimidation. Justice became increasingly arbitrary, with the king often overriding court decisions or altering verdicts for political or financial gain. This style of governance contributed to the growing perception that the king had placed himself above the law, a notion that Magna Carta would directly seek to curtail. The intense centralization of power under John ultimately made his downfall more severe, as there were few willing or able to defend him when rebellion came. Chapter 14. Social impact. Of John's reign, John's rule was not only disastrous in political and military terms, it was socially corrosive. The crushing tax burden, especially scutage and tallages, fell most heavily on the peasantry and the merchant classes. Combined with the instability caused by civil war and excommunication, these policies led to widespread discontent. The interdict, placed on England from 1208 to 1213, meant that no legal marriages, church burials, or religious ceremonies could be held. This caused enormous spiritual distress and contributed to the breakdown of social order. Superstitions flourished, and the population's view of the king darkened further. Economic productivity also declined. Towns and markets suffered from warfare and unpredictable taxation, and many peasants fled their lands, further reducing agricultural output. In this context, John's reign represents not only a political failure, but a period of deep social disruption. Chapter 15. The legacy of Magna Carta. While John sought to annul Magna Carta, the document endured as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. Reissued and reaffirmed by later monarchs, it laid the groundwork for future legal principles, including habeas corpus and the concept that the king is subject to the law. Magna Carta was not initially meant for the common people, but it inspired centuries of constitutional thought. By inadvertently forcing the creation of a written legal constraint on his power, John became the negative example that helped define English liberties. Over time, Magna Carta came to be revered not only in England but across the world. It influenced the development of common law and democratic ideals, making John's reign paradoxically foundational to modern government. Chapter 16. Conclusion. A reign of infamy. King John's life was marked by ambition, treachery, cruelty, and ultimate failure. He was a capable administrator but lacked the vision, charisma, and military skill needed to be a great king. His inability to form lasting alliances, his obsession with control, and his disregard for justice alienated nearly every constituency in his realm. And yet, his legacy endures. Not in glory or admiration, but in the reforms that followed his misrule. The story of King John is a cautionary tale, one that reminds us how power, unchecked, can destroy both ruler and realm. In death, as in life, John remains a controversial figure. Buried in Worcester Cathedral, his tomb is relatively modest for a king, but his impact on history, though born of failure, continues to shape the governance of nations to this day. Fan 2, Henry VIII of England, 1491–1547, a monarch of might and mayhem. Chapter 1, A Royal Birth and Early Years. Henry Tudor was born on June 28, 1491 at Greenwich Palace, the second son of King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. As a prince of the newly established Tudor dynasty, Henry's early years were shaped by the legacy of the Wars of the Roses and the desire for dynastic stability. His older brother, Arthur, was groomed to be king, while Henry was prepared for a life in the church, receiving an exceptional humanist education that included Latin, theology, philosophy, and music. Henry was described as an athletic, intelligent, and charismatic child. He excelled in jousting, hunting, and courtly manners. When Arthur died unexpectedly in 1502, Henry became heir to the throne. His destiny shifted dramatically, and he was thrust into the spotlight of dynastic politics. Chapter 2, Ascension and Early Rule. Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509, following the death of his father. At only 17 years old, he was described by contemporaries as tall, handsome, and the very embodiment of Renaissance kingship. One of his first acts was to marry Catherine of Aragon, his brother Arthur's widow, to solidify Anglo-Spanish relations and fulfill his father's political designs. The early years of Henry's reign were marked by optimism. He delegated many government functions to trusted advisors and focused on the ceremonial and martial aspects of kingship. England initially experienced stability and prosperity, and Henry enjoyed wide popularity. Chapter 3, Warrior King and Continental Ambitions. Henry harbored grand visions of military glory akin to his ancestor, Henry V. In 1513, he launched a campaign against France, capturing the city of Tournai in the Battle of the Spurs. Although the victory was minor in military terms, it was widely celebrated in England and fed Henry's self-image as a warrior king. Henry's alliances shifted frequently. He sought continental prestige through diplomacy, famously hosting the extravagant Field of the Cloth of Gold summit with Francis I of France in 1520. Despite the splendor, real political gains were few, and Henry's ambitions were often undercut by the stronger powers of France and the Holy Roman Empire. Chapter 4, The King's Great Matter. By the late 1520s, Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon had not produced a surviving male heir. Concerned about the Tudor succession, Henry sought an annulment. He claimed that marrying his brother's widow violated divine law, despite papal dispensation. The Pope, under pressure from Catherine's nephew, Emperor Charles V, refused to grant the annulment. Henry's frustration grew, and he began to question
papal authority. This period, known as the King's Great Matter, would eventually lead to a seismic religious and political shift in England. Chapter 5, The English Reformation. Begins faced with papal resistance, Henry began to assert his authority
over the church in England. With the guidance of key advisors such as Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cranmer, he orchestrated a series of legislative acts that severed England's ecclesiastical ties to Rome. In 1533, the Act in Restraint of Appeals was passed, forbidding appeals to the Pope on religious or other matters. Later that year, Cranmer, now Archbishop of Canterbury, granted Henry's long-sought annulment. Henry had already secretly married Anne Boleyn, who was pregnant at the time. This bold move led to his excommunication by Pope Clement VII. In 1534, Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. This momentous change marked the beginning of the English Reformation. It not only redefined England's religious landscape, but also greatly expanded the power of the monarchy. Chapter 6, The rise and fall of Anne Boleyn. Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn was passionate and politically charged. She was crowned queen in a lavish ceremony and gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1533. However, her failure to produce a male heir led to a rapid decline in her favor. Anne's assertive personality and involvement in religious reform won her both staunch allies and bitter enemies. By 1536, her position had weakened. She was arrested and charged with adultery, incest, and high treason, charges that most historians believe were fabricated to facilitate her removal. She was executed by beheading in May 1536, and Henry quickly married Jane Seymour. Anne's legacy would live on, however, through her daughter Elizabeth I, who would become one of England's greatest monarchs. Chapter 7. The dissolution of the monasteries. One of the most dramatic and consequential actions of Henry's reign was the dissolution of the monasteries, carried out between 1536 and 1541. With Cromwell's support, Henry ordered the closure of over 800 religious houses across England, seizing their vast lands and wealth. The rationale was partly religious, removing the influence of Rome and eliminating perceived corruption, but also deeply financial. The crown gained immense revenue, which helped fund military campaigns and royal extravagance. The dissolution disrupted the fabric of English society, displacing thousands of monks and nuns and ending centuries of monastic charitable and educational work. It also redistributed wealth and land to Henry's loyal supporters, permanently altering the power dynamics of the English nobility. Chapter 8. Jane Seymour and the birth of an heir. Following Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour. Just days later, in 1536, Jane was demure and conservative, everything Anne was not, and quickly won the king's favor. In 1537, she gave birth to Henry's long-awaited male heir, Edward, securing her place in history as the mother of Edward VI. The joy was short-lived. Jane died of postnatal complications just days after Edward's birth. Henry was devastated and would later consider her his true wife. Jane was the only one of his 6 wives to receive a queen's funeral and be buried beside him. Jane's brief reign as queen marked a return to Catholic conservatism at court, with a reduction in radical reformist influence. However, her death left Henry once again in search of a queen. Chapter 9. Political intrigue and the fall of Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell, who had risen from humble origins to become the king's chief minister, played a central role in the Reformation and the dissolution of the monasteries. He also engineered Henry's 4th marriage, a political union with Anne of Cleves in 1540, meant to strengthen ties with German Protestant states. Henry was dismayed when he met Anne in person and claimed she was unattractive. The marriage was annulled after just 6 months. Cromwell's enemies at court, especially those favoring Catholic restoration, seized the opportunity to destroy him. He was arrested, charged with treason and heresy, and executed in July 1540. Cromwell's fall marked the end of radical reform under Henry. Though he would marry again Catherine Howard in 1540, his government became increasingly conservative and authoritarian. Chapter 10. Later marriages and growing tyranny. Catherine Howard, Henry's 5th wife and a cousin of Anne Boleyn, was young, lively, and initially captivated the aging king. However, she was implicated in multiple affairs and was executed for adultery in 1542. Henry's final marriage was to Catherine Parr, a learned and devout Protestant who helped reconcile him with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. She also served as a stabilizing presence in his final years. By this time, Henry's health had deteriorated. He was obese, plagued by leg ulcers, and increasingly paranoid. His court became a place of fear, and his justice harsh. Once a vibrant Renaissance prince, he had become an autocratic ruler whose whims shaped the lives and deaths of his closest subjects. Chapter 11. The final years of Henry VIII. Health decline and increasing paranoia. By the early 1540s, Henry's physical health was in steep decline. His once athletic frame gave way to severe obesity, complicated by painful leg ulcers and gout, making even walking difficult. His fiery temper hardened into paranoia and court intrigues deepened. Henry's ruthless side became more pronounced, with many nobles falling victim to accusations of treason. Despite his ailments, Henry continued to rule with an iron fist. His policies became harsher, and he increasingly relied on fear to maintain control. His relationships with his children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, were fraught, but slowly began to stabilize thanks to Catherine Parr's mediation. Chapter 12. Legacy of the Tudor State. Henry VIII transformed the English monarchy fundamentally. His establishment of the Church of England marked a seismic shift in religious authority, setting England on a path of Protestantism and independence from Rome. This reformation had profound social, political, and economic consequences that shaped the nation for centuries. He centralized royal power more than any English king before him and expanded the Royal Navy, laying the groundwork for England's future as a global maritime power. His patronage of the arts and the Renaissance ideals influenced English culture deeply. Chapter 13. The Succession Question and the Heirs. Henry's obsession with securing a male heir defined much of his reign. His only legitimate son, Edward VI, ascended the throne as a child but ruled briefly before his death. Mary I attempted to restore Catholicism, and Elizabeth I, Henry's daughter by Anne Boleyn, would ultimately create a golden age for England. The turmoil over succession and religion led to decades of conflict, but also to the foundation of a strong centralized monarchy and national identity. Chapter 14. Henry VIII and the Arts. Henry was a notable patron of the arts, commissioning magnificent architecture, music, and literature. His court was a center of Renaissance culture. He played musical instruments himself and composed songs. His support helped introduce Renaissance humanism to England, influencing education and intellectual life. Chapter 15. The Impact of Henry's Marriages on Europe. Henry's 6 marriages were not only personal dramas, but also international political events. Alliances were forged and broken with Spain, France, Germany, and Rome through these unions. The annulment of his first marriage and subsequent marriages sparked diplomatic tensions and realigned Europe's religious and political alliances. Chapter 16. The military campaigns and foreign policy. Henry VIII's reign was marked by a series of costly and ambitious military campaigns, particularly against France and Scotland, motivated by a desire to reclaim lost English territories and to assert his status as a European monarch. Henry engaged in several wars that strained the kingdom's finances. In 1513, his victory at the Battle of the Spurs bolstered his reputation, but subsequent campaigns were less successful. His navy, however, saw significant development, with new ships constructed that would later underpin England's naval dominance. His shifting alliances between France, the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain reflected the complex diplomatic landscape of 16th-century Europe. Chapter 17. Religious Turmoil and Persecution. Following the break with Rome, Henry VIII's religious policies oscillated between reform and repression. While he established the Church of England with himself as its head, he remained doctrinally conservative and persecuted both radical Protestants and staunch Catholics who opposed his supremacy. The executions of prominent figures such as Sir Thomas More and Bishop John Fisher underscored his intolerance for dissent. The period also saw the introduction of the 6 Articles, reaffirming traditional Catholic doctrines within the English Church, demonstrating Henry's complex and often contradictory religious stance. Chapter 18. The Court and Cultural Life. Henry VIII's court was a hub of extravagance and culture. Lavish tournaments, banquets, and artistic patronage defined the Tudor court's vibrant social life. Henry's personal charisma and taste for grandeur set the tone for English Renaissance culture. Music, poetry, and drama flourished, with figures like Hans Holbein the Younger producing iconic portraits. The king's love for pageantry and display helped craft a regal image that reinforced his authority and inspired loyalty. Chapter 19. The personal life and personality of Henry VIII. Behind the public figure was a complex man marked by contradictions. Initially charming, athletic, and learned, Henry's later years were marred by physical pain, paranoia, and ruthlessness. His relationships with his 6 wives were central to his personal life and political strategy, reflecting his desire for control and legacy. Despite his tyranny, Henry could be generous and affectionate, particularly toward his children and close advisors. His multifaceted personality made him one of history's most intriguing and controversial monarchs. Chapter 20. Death, Legacy, and Historical Judgment. Henry VIII died on January 28, 1547, at Whitehall Palace. His death marked the end of a turbulent and transformative reign. His son Edward VI succeeded him but ruled only briefly. Henry's legacy was a kingdom forever changed, politically centralized, religiously redefined, and culturally enriched. Historians have debated Henry's reign extensively. Some see him as a ruthless tyrant whose ambitions caused needless suffering, others as a bold and innovative monarch who laid the foundations of modern England. Regardless, his impact on English history is undeniable. Conclusion. Henry VIII remains one of England's most famous and polarizing monarchs. His reign reshaped the nation's religious landscape through the English Reformation, established royal supremacy, and initiated profound political and social changes. His personal life, marked by dramatic marriages and political intrigues, has fascinated historians and popular culture alike. From a vigorous young prince to a powerful yet flawed king, Henry's story is one of ambition, transformation, and enduring legacy. His era set the stage for England's emergence as a major European power and left a complex historical footprint that continues to captivate and provoke debate. Fan 3, Richard III, 1452-1485, The Controversial Last Plantagenet. King of England Introduction. Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, remains one of the most debated and enigmatic figures in English history. Born into a turbulent era marked by the Wars of the Roses, his rise to the throne was shadowed by political intrigue, accusations of ruthless ambition, and the tragic disappearance of his nephews, the princes in the Tower. His reign, though brief, saw significant political and military challenges, culminating in the decisive Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, which ended his rule and the Plantagenet dynasty. This biography will explore Richard's life in 20 detailed chapters, examining his family background, early years, rise to power, reign, military campaigns, controversies, and legacy. Chapter 1. The Plantagenet Legacy and Early Life, 1452-1460. Richard Plantagenet was born on October 2, 1452, at Fotheringhay Castle in Northamptonshire. He was the youngest son of Richard, Duke of York, a key figure in the dynastic conflicts known as the Wars of the Roses, and Cecily Neville, a strong-willed noblewoman. Richard grew up during a time of fierce rivalry between the houses of Lancaster and York for the English throne. His father claimed the right to the crown, challenging the Lancastrian King Henry VI. The early years of Richard's life were marked by violence, shifting allegiances, and political upheaval. His family was deeply embroiled in these conflicts, which shaped Richard's formative years and worldview. Chapter 2. The Wars of the Roses and the Rise of the House of York, 1460-1469. After a series of battles, Richard's father was killed at the Battle of Wakefield in 1460, leaving the young Edward IV, Richard's older brother, to continue the Yorkist cause. Edward's ascent to the throne in 1461 marked a Yorkist victory, but the conflict persisted. Richard was appointed Duke of Gloucester in 1461 and quickly earned a reputation as a skilled soldier and loyal supporter of his brother. His military prowess and leadership during ongoing skirmishes and rebellions helped solidify Yorkist power, though the kingdom remained unstable. Chapter 3. Richard's role in the reigns of Edward IV and the political landscape, 1469–1479. During Edward IV's reign, Richard was a key military commander and political advisor. He helped suppress uprisings and managed key northern territories. His loyalty was unwavering even as Edward's court was rife with factionalism. In 1470, the Lancastrian faction briefly regained power, forcing Edward IV to flee. Richard remained a staunch Yorkist, participating in military campaigns that ultimately restored Edward to the throne in 1471. These turbulent years further demonstrated Richard's dedication and strategic acumen. Chapter 4. Marriage, Family and Political Alliances, 1472–1483. Richard married Anne Neville, daughter of the powerful Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker. This union strengthened his political position and alliance with one of the most influential families in England. The couple had one son, Edward of Middleham. Richard's family ties and alliances were crucial in consolidating his power base in the north and navigating the treacherous political environment of late 15th century England. Chapter 5. The Death of Edward IV and the Succession Crisis, 1483, in April 1483, King Edward IV died unexpectedly, leaving his 12-year-old son Edward V his heir. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was named Lord Protector for the young king. However, the succession quickly became contested, and political maneuvering intensified. Richard moved swiftly to secure his position, citing concerns over the legitimacy of Edward V and his siblings. This period saw mounting tensions in the English court, with various factions vying for influence over the young king and the kingdom's future. Chapter 6. The Princes in the Tower and the Allegations, 1483. Edward V and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, were lodged in the Tower of London ostensibly for their protection. However, the princes mysteriously disappeared from historical records shortly thereafter. Rumors and accusations swirled that Richard III had ordered their deaths to eliminate rivals and secure his claim to the throne. While no definitive evidence exists, the fate of the princes remains one of the greatest mysteries and darkest stains on Richard's legacy. Chapter 7. Richard III's coronation and reign, 1483–1485. On July 6, 1483, Richard was crowned King Richard III. His reign lasted just over 2 years but was marked by significant political reforms and efforts to stabilize the realm. Richard enacted laws aimed at improving justice and curbing corruption. His governance style was direct and at times ruthless. Nevertheless, his legitimacy was contested, and several noble factions opposed his rule, leading to unrest. Chapter 8. The Rise of Henry Tudor and the Threat to Richard's Throne, 1484–1485. Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian claimant, gathered support in exile and prepared to challenge Richard's kingship. His claim to the throne was tenuous but backed by disaffected nobles and foreign allies. In 1485, Henry landed in Wales with an army, leading to the fateful confrontation at the Battle of Bosworth Field. This battle would decide the fate of the Plantagenet dynasty and alter English history forever. Chapter 9. The Battle of Bosworth Field, August 22, 1485. The Battle of Bosworth Field was the decisive confrontation between Richard III and Henry Tudor. Despite Richard's tactical skill and personal bravery, several key allies defected to Henry's side during the battle. The king fought fiercely, but was ultimately killed in combat, marking the end of the Plantagenet line. Richard's death symbolized the close of the Wars of the Roses and the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. His body was initially buried hastily, and for centuries, his grave was lost to history. Chapter 10. The Aftermath of Richard III's death. Following Richard's defeat, Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII, ushering in a new era of stability. Richard's legacy was immediately vilified by Tudor propagandists who portrayed him as a ruthless usurper and murderer, particularly in Shakespeare's famous play. This blackened image shaped popular understanding of Richard III for generations, overshadowing other aspects of his reign and personality. Chapter 11. Rediscovery of Richard III's Remains 2012. In a remarkable archaeological discovery in 2012, Richard III's remains were found beneath a parking lot in Leicester. Scientific analysis confirmed the identity through DNA testing, revealing the king's scoliosis and injuries consistent with battle wounds. This discovery reignited interest in Richard III, prompting historians to reevaluate his reign and legacy with new evidence. Chapter 12. Modern Reinterpretations and Historical Debate. Since the rediscovery of his remains, historians and scholars have debated Richard III's character and actions. Some argue that Tudor propaganda unfairly maligned him, highlighting his administrative reforms and commitment to justice. Others acknowledge his flaws and ruthless methods but see him as a complex figure shaped by the brutal politics of his time. The debate continues, reflecting the enduring fascination with this controversial monarch. Chapter 13. Richard III's Governance and Legal Reforms. Despite his short reign, Richard III implemented several important legal reforms aimed at improving justice for ordinary people. He issued the Act of Uses to clarify land ownership and reduce abuses by powerful nobles. His commitment to fair trials and curbing corruption earned him respect among commoners, contrasting with the often ruthless political struggles of the nobility. Richard also held parliament sessions that sought to stabilize the government and secure his legitimacy as king, though these efforts were hampered by ongoing opposition. Chapter 14. Richard's relationship with the nobility. Richard's reign was marked by tense relationships with many nobles, some of whom viewed him as a usurper. His efforts to centralize power and limit the influence of overmighty subjects created enemies. Yet he also rewarded loyal supporters with lands and titles, striving to build a dependable base. This delicate balance was a challenge for Richard, who faced persistent plots and rebellions during his kingship. Chapter 15. The Role of Anne Neville. Neville, Richard's wife and daughter of the powerful Earl of Warwick, was a significant influence in his life. Their marriage united two Yorkist factions and bolstered Richard's claim. Anne's death in 1485 deeply affected Richard during the critical final months of his reign. Her role, often overshadowed by political events, offers insight into the personal dimension of Richard's character. Chapter 16. The Princes in the Tower. Historical Theories and Mysteries. The fate of the princes in the Tower remains one of the greatest historical mysteries. Numerous theories propose that Richard ordered their murder, but alternative explanations suggest other culprits or even survival. This chapter examines the available evidence, contemporary accounts, and modern interpretations, highlighting the complexities of Tudor propaganda and historical uncertainty. Chapter 17. Richard III's Military Leadership. Richard was an experienced and competent military commander. His campaigns during the Wars of the Roses, including battles at Barnet and Tewkesbury, demonstrated his tactical skill and bravery. His leadership at Bosworth, though ultimately unsuccessful, reflected his determination and personal courage on the battlefield. Chapter 18. Cultural and Social Context of Richard's England. Richard's reign took place during a period of social upheaval and transition. The late medieval world was marked by changing power dynamics, the rise of the gentry, and shifting cultural norms. This chapter explores how these broader changes influenced Richard's policies and challenges. Chapter 19. Richard III in Literature and Popular Culture. Richard's image has been shaped by literature, most famously Shakespeare's Richard III, which portrayed him as a malevolent villain. Over time, this portrayal influenced public perception globally. Modern historians and artists have worked to re-examine and humanize Richard, producing a more nuanced understanding. Chapter 20. The End of the Plantagenet Era and the Beginning of The Tudor age Richard's death at Bosworth ended the Plantagenet dynasty. The rise of Henry Tudor as Henry VII marked a new chapter in English history, bringing relative peace and setting the foundation for the Renaissance and Reformation. Richard III's legacy, both political and cultural, continues to provoke debate and fascination. Conclusion. The complex legacy of Richard III was a man of contrasts, a skilled leader and reformer, yet a figure shrouded in controversy and mystery. His brief reign was marked by efforts to bring justice and order, but also by ruthless power struggles typical of his turbulent era. The rediscovery of his remains and ongoing scholarly debate remind us that history is often shaped by perspective and politics. Richard's life and reign remain a powerful story of ambition, tragedy, and the search for truth. Fan 4, William the Conqueror, 1028 to 1087, the Norman king who changed England. Forever, Chapter 1, Early Life and Illegitimacy, 1028-1047. William was born around 1028 in the town of Falaise, in the Duchy of Normandy, to Duke Robert I and his mistress Herleva. His birth out of wedlock earned him the nickname William the Bastard, a label that haunted him throughout his early years. Despite this stigma, William was the sole heir to the powerful Norman duchy. The political landscape of Normandy at the time was unstable. When Duke Robert left for a pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 1035, he entrusted the young William's guardianship to his cousin, the Count of Burgundy. However, this arrangement led to turmoil. Several Norman barons, seeing an opportunity to seize power during William's minority, began warring among themselves. William's early years were marked by constant danger. Multiple assassination attempts were made on the boy duke, including an infamous plot to kill him by ambush near Falaise. Miraculously, William escaped these dangers. His survival during this chaotic period earned him a reputation for resilience and fortitude. His guardianship passed through various hands as power struggles continued. Eventually, William was placed under the protection of his great-uncle Archbishop Robert of Rouen, who provided guidance and stability. Despite his youth and illegitimate birth, William began to gather loyal supporters among the Norman nobility. Through a combination of political savvy, strategic alliances, and sheer determination, he gradually consolidated his control over Normandy. Chapter 2, Becoming Duke of Normandy, 1047-1051. At the age of 19, William's authority as Duke of Normandy was still fragile. The Norman barons remained unruly, each guarding their own fiefdoms with little respect for central ducal power. It was clear to William that to secure his rule, he would need to demonstrate military strength and political skill. The turning point came with the Battle of Valais-Dunes in 1047. William, with the crucial support of King Henry I of France, confronted a powerful coalition of rebellious Norman barons who opposed his rule. The battle was fierce and bloody. William's forces employed tactical discipline, and after several hours of fighting, the rebels were decisively defeated. This victory marked the beginning of William's dominance over Normandy. The rebellious barons were forced to swear allegiance to him, and the duchy entered a period of relative stability. William wasted no time in reinforcing his authority. He built a network of castles, fortifications, and garrisons across Normandy, asserting control over strategic points. These castles served both as military strongholds and as symbols of Norman ducal power. Marriage was another tool William used to strengthen his position. Around 1051, he married Matilda of Flanders, the daughter of Count Baldwin V of Flanders. This union was politically significant. Flanders was a wealthy and influential region, and the marriage forged a powerful alliance that enhanced William's legitimacy and secured his northern borders. Despite the benefits, the marriage was initially controversial. Pope Leo IX reportedly opposed the union due to consanguinity laws. William and Matilda were distant cousins, but the couple persisted, and the alliance endured. During these years, William also began to cultivate his image as a legitimate and capable ruler. His court in Rouen became a center of Norman culture and governance. He surrounded himself with loyal advisors and knights, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. By the early 1050s, William had transformed from a vulnerable, young duke to a strong, respected leader whose power extended across Normandy. This solid foundation would prove essential for his later ambitions, particularly his claim to the English throne. Chapter 3. Relations with France and England, 1051–1064. As Duke of Normandy, William's political landscape was dominated by the complex dynamics between Normandy, the Kingdom of France, and England. During this period, William skillfully navigated a delicate balance of allegiance and ambition that would lay the groundwork for his eventual conquest of England. William owed formal allegiance to the King of France, who was the nominal overlord of Normandy. However, this relationship was fraught with tension. King Henry I of France sought to assert greater control over his vassals, including William, while William pursued increasing autonomy and influence. One of the major challenges William faced was the hostility of neighboring nobles and barons who resented his growing power. To counterbalance this threat, William pursued alliances through marriage, diplomacy, and military readiness. His marriage to Matilda of Flanders in 1051 not only brought a powerful ally, but also strengthened his political network across northern Europe. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, William's ties to England were becoming increasingly significant. The English king, Edward the Confessor, was childless and aging, raising questions about succession. Edward had strong Norman sympathies, having spent many years in exile in Normandy during the reign of King Harold Harefoot and King Harthacnut. William was a distant cousin to Edward through their shared lineage from the House of Normandy, and had developed a cordial relationship with the English king. According to Norman chroniclers, Edward had promised William the English throne as his successor, a claim that would later form the basis of William's right to invade England. In England, however, powerful noble families, especially the House of Godwin, wielded great influence. Harold Godwinson, Earl of Wessex, emerged as Edward's most trusted advisor and was seen as the natural candidate for the throne upon Edward's death. The tension between William's claim and Harold's ambitions would intensify over the next decade, as both men prepared for a struggle that would culminate in the historic Battle of Hastings. During these years, William also dealt with internal challenges in Normandy, including disputes with rebellious vassals and external threats from French rivals. His military campaigns during this time consolidated his control and demonstrated his increasing power. By 1064, William had established himself not only as a dominant force in Normandy, but also as a legitimate contender for the English crown, setting the stage for one of the most transformative events in medieval history. Chapter 4. Claim to the English throne, 1064–1066. The death of King Edward the Confessor in January 1066 plunged England into a succession crisis. Edward had no direct heirs, and the throne became contested by multiple claimants. At the center of this storm was William, Duke of Normandy, who asserted a legitimate claim to the English crown. William's claim was rooted in several factors. According to Norman sources, Edward had promised William the throne during a visit William made to England around 1064. This promise was allegedly sealed by an oath sworn by Harold Godwinson, Edward's powerful earl, who had supposedly pledged to support William's claim. However, the English nobility and the Witan, the king's council, had other ideas. Upon Edward's death, Harold Godwinson was crowned king almost immediately. Harold's coronation was supported by many English nobles who feared foreign rule and favored a strong native leader. William viewed Harold's accession as a betrayal. He accused Harold of breaking his sacred oath and thus declared Harold a usurper. Determined to enforce his claim, William began preparing for an invasion of England. In the months leading up to the invasion, William secured vital support from the papacy. Pope Alexander II granted William a papal banner symbolizing the Church's blessing for his campaign. This endorsement provided not only spiritual legitimacy, but also encouraged many Norman and European nobles to join William's cause. William also built a formidable invasion force. He assembled an army composed of Norman knights, mercenaries, and allies from across Europe. The fleet he commissioned was impressive for its time, capable of transporting thousands of soldiers and horses across the English Channel. The English were caught off guard. While Harold faced threats from the north, most notably from King Harald Hardrada of Norway, William was methodically organizing his invasion plans. The timing was crucial. In September 1066, after defeating the Norwegian invaders at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold's forces rapidly marched south to meet William's invading army, which had landed on the southern coast of England near Pevensey. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation that would determine the future of England and alter the course of European history forever. Chapter 5. The Norman Invasion and the Battle of Hastings, 1066. The summer of 1066 was a momentous time for England. After years of political uncertainty, William the Conqueror finally launched his invasion, crossing the English Channel with a well-prepared and battle-hardened army. His landing on the southern coast marked the beginning of one of the most pivotal military campaigns in medieval history. William's forces touched down near Pevensey on September 28, 1066, establishing a beachhead and quickly fortifying their position. Meanwhile, Harold Godwinson, fresh from his victory at the Battle of Stamford Bridge against the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada, had to rush his exhausted army south to confront the new threat. The two armies met on October 14, 1066, near the town of Hastings. Harold's troops formed a shield wall atop Senlac Hill, a strong defensive position that initially held firm against repeated Norman assaults. The battle was brutal and lasted from morning until dusk. William's tactics were versatile and adaptive. When direct assaults failed, feigned retreats drew portions of the English forces down the hill, breaking their formation. The Norman cavalry and archers exploited these moments to devastating effect. The turning point came when Harold Godwinson was struck down. According to tradition, an arrow pierced his eye, though historical accounts vary. The death of their king shattered English morale, and the shield wall eventually collapsed. By nightfall, William's victory was complete. The battle resulted in heavy English casualties and marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule. William's triumph at Hastings was more than a military conquest. It was the dawn of a new era. It established Norman dominance over England and set the foundation for sweeping political, social, and cultural changes that would transform the kingdom. Following the victory, William moved swiftly to secure his position. He marched to London, gaining the submission of key nobles and clergy, and was crowned King of England on Christmas Day, 1066, in Westminster Abbey. The Battle of Hastings remains one of the most studied and legendary battles in history, a testament to William's strategic genius, the bravery of his troops, and the dramatic shift in medieval European power dynamics. Chapter 6. Consolidation of Power and Rebellion Suppression, 1067-1075. After his coronation in 1066, William faced the monumental task of consolidating his rule over a restless and divided England. The Norman conquest had been swift and decisive, but the country was far from peaceful. Resistance from Anglo-Saxon nobles and regional uprisings threatened William's newly acquired kingdom. William moved quickly to establish control. He distributed vast tracts of English land to his Norman followers, rewarding their loyalty and creating a new ruling class. This redistribution dramatically altered the social and political landscape, displacing many Anglo-Saxon landowners and planting seeds of resentment. To secure his realm, William built a network of imposing castles across strategic locations, from Windsor to the Tower of London. These fortifications served as military bases, administrative centers, and symbols of Norman authority, projecting power deep into the English countryside. Despite these efforts, rebellion flared repeatedly. In 1067, the city of Exeter rose against Norman rule, only to be besieged and forced to surrender after a month. Other uprisings occurred in Northumbria, Herefordshire, and East Anglia, fueled by displaced nobles and disenfranchised locals. William responded with ruthless efficiency. His campaigns were marked by harsh reprisals and scorched earth tactics, including the infamous Harrying of the North, 1069–1070, a series of devastating raids aimed at crushing resistance in northern England. These actions caused widespread famine and suffering but effectively subdued the region. Simultaneously, William dealt with threats from abroad. The Kingdom of Scotland and the Welsh principalities posed intermittent challenges to his authority, prompting diplomatic and military responses to secure England's borders. By 1075, William's authority was largely uncontested. The revolt of the Earls in 1075, a coalition of disaffected Norman and Anglo-Saxon nobles, was quickly suppressed, reinforcing William's dominance. Through a combination of military might, political acumen, and strategic alliances, William transformed England from a fractured kingdom into a centralized Norman state, a foundation that would shape English history for centuries to come. Chapter 7. The Domesday Book and Administrative Reforms, 1085–1087. By the mid-1080s, William the Conqueror had solidified his grip on England, but he faced ongoing challenges in managing his vast new kingdom. To effectively govern and tax his subjects, William initiated one of medieval England's most ambitious administrative projects, the Domesday Survey. In 1085, William ordered a comprehensive survey of his English territories. The purpose was to create an accurate record of landholdings, resources, and taxable assets. This monumental task required gathering data from hundreds of local officials and landowners, documenting everything from villages and farms to mills and fisheries. The survey culminated in the Domesday Book, completed in 1086. This detailed record provided the Crown with unparalleled knowledge of the country's economic resources and population. It allowed William to assess taxes fairly and to detect any attempts to evade royal dues. The Domesday Book remains a remarkable historical document, providing modern historians with invaluable insight into 11th century England's social and economic structure. Its compilation demonstrated William's commitment to centralized governance and fiscal responsibility. Beyond taxation, William implemented broader administrative reforms. He strengthened the role of sheriffs, royal officials, responsible for law enforcement and tax collection in each shire. The legal system was also enhanced, blending Norman customs with existing Anglo-Saxon laws to create a more uniform rule of law. William's reforms extended to the church as well. He restructured the English clergy, installing Norman bishops and abbots to ensure loyalty to the crown and the papacy. This consolidation of ecclesiastical power further reinforced his authority. William's final years saw continued efforts to maintain order and prepare for the future succession. He divided his vast territories between his sons, signaling the beginning of the dynasty's legacy. In 1087, William's reign came to an end. He died following injuries sustained during a campaign in northern France. His death marked the close of a transformative chapter in English history, one defined by conquest, consolidation, and lasting change. Chapter 8. William's Legacy and Succession, 1087 and beyond. William the Conqueror's death in 1087 marked the end of a monumental reign that forever altered the course of English and European history. Yet the legacy he left behind was complex, far-reaching, and a subject of ongoing debate among historians. Before his death, William had taken deliberate steps to secure the future of his dynasty. He divided his vast holdings between his sons in a bid to maintain the unity of his realm while appeasing their ambitions. His eldest surviving son, Robert Curthose, inherited the Duchy of Normandy. Robert was a capable but often restless and rebellious noble, whose rule over Normandy would be marked by internal conflicts and eventual exile. William's second surviving son, William Rufus, was crowned King William II of England. Unlike his father, William II was known for his harsh rule and conflicts with the English nobility and church. The division of power, however, sowed seeds of discord. Rivalries between the brothers would lead to strife both in England and Normandy, destabilizing the region in the years following William's death. Despite these challenges, William's foundational changes endured. The Norman aristocracy he installed reshaped England's social fabric. The introduction of Norman law, language, and culture blended with Anglo-Saxon traditions, creating a new English identity. The feudal system was firmly established, centralizing royal authority and redefining land ownership and obligations. Castles and fortifications dotted the landscape, serving both as defensive structures and symbols of Norman dominance. William's reforms in governance, such as the Domesday Book and enhanced royal administration, provided a model for efficient rule that would influence English monarchs for generations. Moreover, William's impact extended beyond England. His conquest established Normandy as a powerful duchy, with direct ties to the English crown, setting the stage for future conflicts and alliances that shaped medieval Europe. In cultural terms, the Norman conquest ushered in architectural advancements, including the Romanesque style evident in cathedrals and castles. It also influenced literature and the arts as Norman French became the language of the elite in the courts. William's reign was not without controversy. His harsh measures, including the brutal suppression of rebellions and the displacement of Anglo-Saxon nobility, left a legacy of resentment and hardship. Nonetheless, his success in uniting England and Normandy under a single ruler established the foundations of a powerful medieval kingdom. William the Conqueror remains a towering figure in history, a warrior, statesman, and architect of a new era. His conquest transformed England from a fractured land into a centralized monarchy and left an indelible mark on the medieval world. Fan 5. Edward III of England, 1239–1307. The hammer of the Scots and architect of medieval England. Introduction. Edward III, known as Longshanks for his tall stature and Hammer of the Scots for his military campaigns, ruled England from 1272 until his death in 1307. His reign was marked by significant military conquests, legal reforms, and efforts to strengthen the monarchy. Edward's actions shaped England's medieval identity and had lasting impacts on the British Isles. Chapter 1. Early Life and Ascension. Edward was born on June 17, 1239, to King Henry III and Eleanor of Provence. As the eldest son, he was groomed to inherit the throne. His childhood was influenced by the political tensions of his father's reign, including conflicts with barons seeking to limit royal power. Educated in the chivalric tradition, Edward excelled in military training and courtly manners. His early experiences in government, including his role as a negotiator and military commander, prepared him for kingship. In 1259, Edward married Eleanor of Castile, a union that not only strengthened political alliances, but also proved personally significant. Their partnership would deeply influence Edward's reign. Edward became Prince of Wales in 1301, a title created specifically for him, symbolizing his role as heir apparent. When King Henry III died in 1272, Edward was on crusade in the Holy Land. He returned to England in 1274 to assume the throne, ready to embark on a transformative reign. Chapter 2. Early Challenges in the Welsh Campaigns, 1274–1283. Upon his return to England in 1274, Edward I faced a kingdom still grappling with the legacies of his father's troubled reign. The baronial unrest, financial instability, and external threats demanded immediate and decisive action. One of Edward's primary concerns was the unconquered Welsh territories under the rule of Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, Prince of Wales. Llywelyn had consolidated power and resisted English dominance, posing a significant challenge to Edward's ambition of unifying the British Isles under English rule. Edward launched a military campaign against Llywelyn in 1277. Utilizing superior tactics and logistics, Edward's forces advanced into North Wales. Llywelyn was forced into a peace treaty at Aberconwy, which limited his authority and ceded important lands to the English crown. However, tensions simmered beneath the surface. In 1282, Llywelyn's brother Dafydd initiated a rebellion that reignited conflict. Edward responded with overwhelming force, determined to crush Welsh resistance once and for all. The campaign of 1282-1283 was marked by brutal warfare and strategic sieges. Edward's army systematically captured Welsh strongholds, culminating in Llywelyn's death in battle. Dafydd was captured and executed, effectively ending organized Welsh resistance. In the aftermath, Edward implemented sweeping changes to Wales. He constructed a series of formidable castles, such as Caernarfon, Conwy, and Harlech, to solidify English control and deter future rebellions. Moreover, Edward integrated Wales into the English legal and administrative system through the Statute of Ruthless in 1284. This statute extended English common law to Wales while allowing limited Welsh legal customs, marking a significant step in unifying the two territories. Edward's victory in Wales earned him the title Prince of Wales, a tradition that endures as the title for the English heir apparent. His campaigns demonstrated his military acumen and commitment to expanding and consolidating his kingdom. Chapter 3. The English Parliament and Legal Reforms, 1285–1297. Edward I is often credited with shaping the English Parliament into a more structured institution, laying the groundwork for the parliamentary system that would evolve over centuries. His reign saw important legal reforms and the establishment of Parliament as a critical forum for governance. The development of Parliament, following the model Parliament of 1295, Edward summoned what became a more representative assembly, including not only nobles and clergy but also commoners from towns and counties. This inclusiveness allowed the king to seek broader consent for taxation and legislation, thereby strengthening royal authority while acknowledging the role of his subjects. The 1295 Parliament is often seen as the prototype for later English parliaments, setting precedents in representation and procedure. Legal reforms and statutes, Edward sought to reform the legal system to enforce royal justice and curb abuses by nobles and officials. Among his significant statutes were Statute of Westminster Barmore 1275, addressed issues like land disputes, inheritance, and local governance. It reinforced the king's role as the ultimate judicial authority. Statute of Gloucester 1278, strengthened royal rights over land and addressed illegal land seizures. Quo warranto proceedings. Edward's administration challenged local lords to prove their rights to certain privileges and lands, aiming to reduce feudal abuses. The role of the courts. Edward expanded the scope and efficiency of royal courts, including the Court of Common Pleas and the King's Bench, which handled civil and criminal cases respectively. This centralization helped ensure consistent application of law across the realm. Taxation and consent to fund his military campaigns, particularly against Scotland and France, Edward increasingly relied on Parliament to approve taxes. This financial dependence necessitated regular parliaments and laid the foundation for the future power of the English Parliament in fiscal matters. Chapter 4. The Wars with Scotland. Begin 1297–1306. Edward III's ambitions to assert English dominance extended beyond Wales to Scotland, igniting a prolonged and brutal conflict that would earn him the ominous title Hammer of the Scots. The wars with Scotland became a defining feature of his later reign. Background: Scottish succession crisis. The death of the Scottish king Alexander III in 1286 plunged Scotland into a succession crisis, as his heir, Margaret, the Maid of Norway, died en route to Scotland. With no clear successor, multiple claimants vied for the throne. Edward I was invited to arbitrate the dispute, a move he used to assert overlordship over Scotland. He insisted that the Scottish nobility recognize him as their feudal lord before proceeding with the selection of a king. The rise of resistance in 1296. Edward invaded Scotland, sacking Berwick and defeating the Scots at the Battle of Dunbar. He deposed John Balliol, the chosen Scottish king, and attempted to impose direct English rule. This heavy-handed approach sparked widespread Scottish resistance. The Scottish nobility and common folk alike resented English control and rallied behind figures such as William Wallace. William Wallace and the Battle of Stirling Bridge. William Wallace emerged as a symbol of Scottish resistance. In 1297, he and Andrew Moray led Scottish forces to a stunning victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, utilizing clever tactics to overcome the larger English army. Wallace was appointed Guardian of Scotland and continued to resist English rule, fiercely inspiring a nationalist uprising. Edward's campaigns and the Battle of Falkirk in response, Edward launched a series of military campaigns to subdue Scotland. In 1298, at the Battle of Falkirk, Edward's well-organized army defeated Wallace's forces, forcing him into hiding. Despite this setback, resistance persisted, fueled by Scottish patriotism and the desire for independence. The rise of Robert the Bruce. By the early 1300s, Robert the Bruce, a powerful Scottish noble, became a leading figure in the fight for Scottish independence. His complex allegiances and eventual coronation as King of Scots in 1306 marked a new phase in the conflict. Edward responded swiftly, campaigning against Bruce and his supporters, but the wars would drag on beyond his lifetime. Edward I's wars with Scotland were costly and relentless, underscoring his determination to unify the British Isles under English rule, but also sowing the seeds of enduring Scottish resistance. Chapter 5. Edward's personal life and legacy. Edward, I was not only a formidable king on the battlefield and in governance, but also a man whose personal life deeply influenced his reign and legacy. Marriage to Eleanor of Castile. Edward married Eleanor of Castile in 1254 when both were young. Their marriage was notable for its strong personal bond and mutual devotion, which was somewhat unusual for royal marriages of the time, often arranged purely for political gain. Eleanor accompanied Edward on many campaigns and bore him 16 children, though only a few survived to adulthood. Their relationship was a cornerstone of Edward's life. Eleanor's death and the Eleanor crosses. Eleanor died in 1290, deeply mourning Edward. To commemorate her, Edward commissioned the construction of the Eleanor crosses, a series of 12 ornate monuments marking the nightly resting places of her funeral procession from Lincoln to Westminster Abbey. These crosses stand as a testament to their enduring love. Later marriage to Margaret of France after Eleanor's death. Edward married Margaret of France in 1299. Though politically advantageous, this marriage did not produce children and was reportedly less affectionate than his first. Personality and leadership style. Edward was known for his imposing physical stature, earning the nickname Longshanks, strict discipline, and unwavering resolve. He was a pragmatic ruler who valued order, justice, and loyalty. He was also a skilled administrator who demanded efficiency and had little patience for dissent, which sometimes led to harsh measures against rebels and opponents. Legacy. Edward I's reign left an indelible mark on England and its neighbors. He reshaped the English legal system, expanded royal authority, and sought to unify the British Isles under his rule. Though his campaigns against Wales and Scotland were brutal, they demonstrated his determination. Chapter 6. The Welsh Castles and Architectural Legacy. One of Edward I's most enduring legacies lies in the impressive network of castles he built across Wales following his conquest. These fortifications not only secured English dominance but also symbolized royal power and architectural innovation. Strategic importance of the castles. After the defeat of Llywelyn ap Gruffudd and the consolidation of English rule in Wales, Edward initiated a large-scale castle-building program. His goal was to establish military strongholds that would prevent future rebellions and control key territories. The castles served as administrative centers, military garrisons, and symbols of English authority, projecting power deep into Welsh. As notable castles. Caernarfon Castle. Perhaps the most famous, Caernarfon was designed with concentric walls and polygonal towers inspired by the walls of Constantinople. Edward envisioned it as a royal palace as well as a fortress, reflecting his ambition and prestige. Conwy Castle. Located on the north coast, Conwy was strategically placed to protect the surrounding region and the vital port town. Its robust defenses included massive curtain walls and multiple towers. Harlech Castle. Positioned on a rocky outcrop, Harlech's natural defenses were enhanced by man-made fortifications, making it one of the most impregnable castles in Wales. Architectural innovations. Edward's castles introduced several advancements. Concentric design. Multiple layers of walls allowed defenders to retreat inward if outer defenses were breached. Gatehouse complexes. Fortified entrances with murder holes. Portcullises and drawbridges enhanced security. Royal palaces. Castles were not just military structures but also grand residences, showcasing royal authority and wealth. Legacy of the castles. These castles remain some of the best preserved medieval fortifications in Europe and are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They stand as testament to Edward's vision of combining military might with architectural grandeur. Chapter 7. Edward's Crusade and Foreign Policy. Edward I's reign was marked not only by internal consolidation but also by significant engagement with international affairs. His crusading ambition and foreign diplomacy played crucial roles in shaping his kingship. The Ninth Crusade. Before ascending to the throne, Edward participated in the Ninth Crusade, 1271-1272, a military expedition aimed at reclaiming territory in the Holy Land. Though the crusade achieved limited success, Edward's participation enhanced his reputation as a warrior king. During this campaign, Edward experienced firsthand the complexities of medieval warfare and diplomacy in the volatile Levantine region. His leadership and bravery were noted by contemporaries. Return and accession. Edward returned to England in 1274 after the death of his father, Henry III, to assume the throne. The Crusade experience influenced his military strategies and political outlook. Relations with France and continental powers. Edward's foreign policy was heavily influenced by his relations with France. The Angevin territories and claims to the French crown made England and France natural rivals. Edward sought to maintain his holdings in Gascony and negotiated various treaties to balance power. However, tensions persisted, leading to intermittent conflicts and diplomatic maneuvering. Marriage. Alliances. Edward used marriage as a tool of diplomacy, securing alliances with powerful European families. His marriage to Eleanor of Castile strengthened ties with Castile, while his second marriage to Margaret of France helped ease tensions with the French crown. Scottish relations. In context, Edward's assertion of overlordship over Scotland was also part of his broader strategy to secure England's borders and influence in the British Isles. Edward's foreign policy reflected his determination to assert English influence abroad, though often constrained by the complexities of medieval politics. Chapter 8. The Quo Warranto and administrative reforms. One of Edward I's defining policies was the use of the Quo Warranto inquiries, a legal mechanism aimed at reinforcing royal authority by challenging the legitimacy of local lords' privileges and landholdings. The Quo Warranto process. The term Quo Warranto means, by what warrant? Edward's administration required local lords and landholders to produce legal documents proving their right to hold certain lands, privileges, or jurisdictional powers. Many feudal lords had exercised rights for generations without formal royal approval. Edward's goal was to curb abuses, recover royal rights, and centralize governance under the crown. This process was both a legal and political tool designed to enforce the king's authority over potentially rebellious nobles. Impact on feudal rights. The inquiries led to numerous challenges against the barons and other landholders, sometimes sparking resentment. While some successfully defended their claims, others lost privileges or lands that were reclaimed by the crown. This reassertion of royal prerogative reinforced the centralization of power and the rule of law. Administrative reforms. Alongside Quo Warranto, Edward implemented reforms to improve royal administration. Royal officials. Increased appointment of sheriffs, justices of the peace, and royal clerks loyal to the crown. Taxation system. Streamlined collection methods to ensure efficient revenue flow, particularly to fund military campaigns. Legal standardization. Promotion of uniform laws and courts across the realm, reducing local disparities. Legacy of administrative changes. Edward's reforms helped transform England's medieval governance, from a fragmented feudal system into a more centralized state apparatus. These changes enhanced royal control, increased efficiency, and laid foundations for modern government. Chapter 9. Edward's final years and death. As Edward I entered the twilight of his reign, his focus remained firmly on consolidating his kingdom and pursuing military campaigns, particularly against Scotland. His final years were marked by relentless efforts to impose English rule over the fractious northern neighbor, demonstrating his unwavering determination as a monarch. Renewed campaigns in Scotland. 1306, Robert the Bruce declared himself King of Scots, escalating the conflict between England and Scotland. Edward responded with vigor, launching a series of military campaigns to suppress Bruce's rebellion and restore English dominance. Despite advancing age, Edward personally led troops into battle, exemplifying his characteristic resilience and martial leadership. However, the rugged Scottish terrain and guerrilla tactics employed by Bruce's forces made the conquest arduous. Declining health, the harsh conditions of campaigning, combined with Edward's advancing years, began to take a toll on his health. Chronic illnesses and wounds sustained during battles increasingly limited his mobility. Nonetheless, Edward remained actively involved in military and administrative affairs, maintaining his authoritative grip on the kingdom until his final days. Death and burial. Edward I died on July 7, 1307, at Burr by Sands near Carlisle, while preparing for another campaign against Scotland. His passing marked the end of an era characterized by determined expansion and legal reform. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, in a tomb that reflects his royal stature and enduring legacy. Succession. Edward was succeeded by his son, Edward II, whose reign would contrast sharply with his father's strength and effectiveness. The elder Edward's death ushered in a period of political instability, underscoring the challenges of maintaining the powerful state he had built. Edward I's final years epitomized his relentless commitment to kingship, leaving behind a kingdom strengthened in law and ambition but facing ongoing challenges. Chapter 10. Edward I's legacy in history and culture. Edward I's reign left a profound impact not only on the political and military landscape of medieval England, but also on its cultural and historical identity. His legacy continues to resonate through the centuries in various forms. Legal and administrative legacy. Edward is often credited with laying the foundations of the English common law system. His legal reforms, including the use of quo warranto, inquiries and the strengthening of royal courts, helped establish principles of governance that endure to this day. His efforts to standardize laws and assert royal authority significantly shaped the evolution of the English monarchy and its relationship with the nobility. Architectural contributions. The castles Edward built in Wales remain some of the finest examples of medieval military architecture. These structures symbolize royal power and innovation, and many are preserved as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Their design influenced subsequent fortifications in Britain and beyond. Cultural representation. Edward I's persona as Longshanks and Hammer of the Scots has been immortalized in literature, art, and folklore. He is often depicted as a formidable and sometimes ruthless king, embodying the ideals of medieval kingship. Historical novels, plays, and films have explored his life and reign, contributing to his enduring fame. Historical debate. Scholars continue to debate Edward's legacy, with some viewing him as a visionary ruler who strengthened England, while others criticize his harsh methods and the suffering caused by his wars. His campaigns in Wales and Scotland, though successful in the short term, also fostered long-standing resentment and resistance. Conclusion. The enduring legacy of Edward I's reign was transformative, shaping medieval England's legal system, military strategy, and governance. His determination forged a stronger monarchy, expanded English influence, and left monuments in stone and law. Though his reign involved harsh measures and brutal wars, his impact resonates through English history as the king who balanced peace,